Top 10 wild explanations for plane disappearances and crashes. Number 10. The living survivors became cannibals. The odyssey of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 will forever be etched in people's memories. The crash in the Andes Mountains actually claimed the lives of most of the passengers in October of 1972. Another 10 passengers were killed in an avalanche. The remaining passengers were left without food or sustenance. The survivors then had to make the hard decision to eat the dead passengers, whose bodies had been well preserved in the ice. Finally, 2 of the passengers trekked over the Andes Mountains and were able to lead authorities to the rest of the survivors. However, for all time, aviation now has its own version of the Donner Party. Number 9. The plane was shot down by a terrorist missile. On December the 21st, 1988, a bomb destroyed Pan Am Flight 103 en route from London to New York. Libyan terrorists were blamed for the attack. Eventually, a bomb stored in an audio cassette player was found to be the cause. To date, only 1 man has ever been convicted of the bombing. However, at the time and to this day, there's another theory on the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 that will not leave the public's imagination. That explanation is a rocket-propelled grenade or actual surface-to-air missile took down the flight. The conspiracy theory goes that the authorities did not want the public to know that terrorists possessed such capabilities, or that terrorists were able to launch a missile on foreign soil. There were even complaints that the audio tape deck bomb was a plant. Once a conspiracy theory takes hold, it's hard to shake. Number 8. The plane was attacked by another nation. Again, this one has kind of scary roots in reality. In August of 1983, Soviet fighters shot down Korean Flight 007, bringing the entire Cold War to a near boil. The 007 was a Boeing 747 passenger plane. Declassified documents have now revealed that the downing of 007 was very close to being the event that sparked World War III. President Ronald Reagan had already made his famous Evil Empire speech about the Soviet Union the previous March. The impetus seemed similar to the sinking of the Lusitania, which nearly drew the United States into World War I. The Soviet pilot would later state that he had no time to think, but had a job to do with the plane near Soviet airspace. It all sounded too curiously like I was just following orders. Number 7. The plane was attacked by our own nation. Reading 9/11 conspiracy theories may yet be the one thing that would convince you that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. If you can get near a computer with internet access, then you could probably come up with a novel about how the attacks of September the 11th, 2001 were an inside job by the United States government, and get at least one person out there to be convinced that it was gospel. People have started out writing fictional stories about it, and then been convinced that somehow their fictional story was how it actually happened. The most important thing here is the belief by the conspirators that the Muslim terrorists were framed. You would be surprised, or potentially not, how many of them believe that the Israeli government, in conjunction with the United States, destroyed not only the planes, but that the World Trade Center was a controlled demolition. Number 6. All the people on board were already dead. Singapore Airlines Flight 21 had one of the longest routes for a plane in the world. It went from Newark, New Jersey to Singapore in one continuous non-stop flight. The flight also had corpse lockers in which dead bodies could be stored because the flight would not make an emergency stopover on places like a polar ice cap. Flights like this tend to lead to rumors that countries could intentionally stock a flight completely with corpses for the sole purpose of getting shot down by other nations. The pilots would essentially run kamikaze missions, and it would be hard to tell from the remains exactly when they died. On the level of insanity, this one is at least somewhat plausible. Number 5. The survivors are living on an island somewhere. Sure, we now all have the metaphysics of the television show Lost to back up this notion. However, there are a surprising number of people looking for evidence that as far back as Amelia Earhart, plane crash survivors lived castaway lifestyles. The film Castaway also took up this notion. With Earhart, there are still people doing excavations on or about Howland Island. The theory goes that Earhart actually landed the plane having run out of fuel and was never found to this day. If physical effects of Earhart could be found on the island, not as scattered debris or portions of the plane, then there might yet be credence to this theory. After all, nothing else has managed to give a better explanation in nearly a century. Number 4. The plane was downed by a dinosaur. There are people who will believe almost anything up to and including that dinosaurs still walk, swim, and possibly fly among us. The truth of the matter is that we have not identified every single living thing on this planet. There are even people who claim to have seen pterodactyls as they have flown in planes. All we are saying is that in the case of a pterodactyl attack, we are not going to side with the passenger airline on this one. It's simple physics. Ordinary birds have brought down aircraft due to some collision or another. What would happen if it flew into a flying dinosaur? How apt would the Federal Aviation Administration be to put the phrase giant talon and ripped dinosaur wing into its report? Number 3. Wormhole through another dimension. There has long been a romanticism that plane travel and spaceflight could take us to destinations that we had not intended. Legends of places like the Bermuda Triangle are filled with magnificent disappearing acts which seem like the plane or boats might have simply vanished off the face of the earth. There is no real evidence for the so-called Philadelphia experiment, but that did not stop people from believing that large magnets could send a whole ship through space and time. Of course, if wormholes do not exist naturally, then why would people worry about something like the Large Hadron Collider creating one unnaturally? Why did they actually have to study whether the thing was an apocalyptic doomsday device that could drag a whole planet into another universe when there is absolutely no possibility that it could happen to a plane? All we are saying is that it bears a little consideration. We are not saying anyone survived in another universe. We are saying that the trip might have been possible. Number 2. The plane travelled back or forward through time. The most obvious one of these is the Odyssey of Flight 33 from the original Twilight Zone series, which examines more than once the theory of planes travelling through time, examining a plane taking off in one time and then landing or flying through another. Maybe we have not dug down far enough to find an ancient crash, or simply not witnessed an old plane finally making its landing at a modern-day airport. The plane simply vanishing, as pointed out in the wormhole scenario, does not necessarily mean that it did not make a journey. It simply means that it did not make the intended journey. Time travel has fascinated the people of Earth since there has been time itself. The plane is just the latest type of conduit, which might make it possible. At some point, it might even fly past a DeLorean. Number 1. When all else fails, aliens. Depending on the perceived level of technology, there are several different ways to tell this one. The unidentified flying object may have disintegrated the craft as well as all evidence of the passengers. The more popular theory is that the UFO simply took the craft as well as all the passengers on board for its own nefarious purposes. By nefarious purposes, feel free to read in here anal probing. There is, of course, the hope that by now they have learned all they can from that. According to films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, as well as Flight of the Navigator, there is an off chance that one day we may get the entire craft and everyone in it back intact, as well as unaged. This is also assuming they have yet to figure out what wonderful cuisine we humans can make. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button in the top right. Our channel has loads of other awesome videos just like this.